Okay, I know what you're thinking. Anime analysis, Satoru Gojo's death was basically confirmed. Why are you making a video about whether or not he'll be returning? Although it may seem like the strongest of the modern generation met his end to Ryomen Sukuna, I wanted to make a video theorizing if Gojo could ultimately come back to the story in some way, shape, or form, and how that would potentially happen. I know I'm not the only YouTuber to hop on the copium, but I truly couldn't help myself. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. Getting into Gojo's death itself in chapter 236, we got some hints during his dialogue with people he's talking to in the afterlife that indicate he has a different mentality than the rest of his friends. When Gojo is talking to Nanami in the afterlife, he mentions that if you want a fresh start, head north. And if you want to stay who you've always been, head south. Without hesitation, Nanami says that he chose to go south, commenting on how he's a backward-looking person and bet on his own future in his final moment. Thanking Haibara for leading him in that direction, it's obvious that he chose to go south as well. Gojo, after hearing this, doesn't make an official statement on which direction he chooses, he just says, "I see," while also later saying that, "I pray that this all isn't just my imagination." Okay, so this is the first indication that Gojo may not want to head in the same direction as many of his friends. It's been depicted in the anime and manga that Gojo is highly based off of the depiction of Buddha. During his fight with Toji, the line that he says about how he alone is the honored one is a direct statement made from Buddha himself. Additionally, when Buddha realized that his life was coming to an end, he decided to go north to the foothills of the Himalayas, the region where he was ultimately born. Even more so, we see Gojo sitting on the opposite side of Nanami and Haibara, contrasting their ideologies of going south. And to give further evidence on why Gojo would go north, Nanami says himself, "You live for jujutsu. You don't wield it to protect something. You use it solely for the sake of satisfying yourself." What makes this truly difficult to determine is that you have two sides to the character of Gojo. You have a selfish individual who only cares about proving his strength in combat, and you have the empathetic and caring mentor who wants to foster a new age of sorcerers in the future. The selfish identity of Gojo would without a doubt head north, while the empathetic identity would head south. And I know JJK has gone on record to say that he actually despises the character of Gojo because he's such an overwhelming presence that it actually hinders the natural progression of the story. So that is why I think Gojo will return, but not without some major downgrades. But before discussing that in more depth, the second reason why I think Gojo will return to the series is because reverse curse technique is not completely off the table. We clearly see in chapter 236 when he's killed by Sukuna that his head is still attached to his body. We've seen in the case of Yuji, Sukuna has quite literally been able to revive him from a state where even Gojo himself couldn't tell if he was dead or not. And to validate that Gojo could potentially bring himself back from this state is when Sukuna is talking about Shoko's reverse curse technique output in chapter 248. Sukuna mentions how Shoko's reverse curse technique is not close to the same level as his or Gojo's, implying that if Sukuna could revive a completely dead Yuji, Gojo could as well. So I think based on all of this evidence, the foreshadowing has been laid out for the return of Satoru Gojo. The only real question to ask is how this will ultimately happen, and I have one inclination. In the beginning of the fight with Sukuna, Gojo enlists the help of Gakuganji and Utahime to boost his curse technique output to 200% as he performs a hollow purple. In chapter 248, we see Wee and Kurara transporting the injured/dead bodies around the battlefield using his teleportation curse technique to Shoko, when it's then confirmed that Gojo's body was sent to her in that exact same way. And that is why Sukuna suspects it's the reason that Gojo's body instantly vanished. I think it's highly likely with the combination of Shoko amped by Gakuganji and Utahime, bringing Gojo back is well within the realm of possibilities. Also, I think it's very within Gojo's capabilities to continue healing if Shoko is able to bring him back after death. We know from Todo that cursed energy comes from your gut and spreads out throughout the rest of your body. Reverse curse technique is simply multiplying the negative energy together to become positive, but it originates in an entirely different location. It's stated in the fight between Hakari and Kashimo that reverse curse technique comes from your brain entirely. This is why Satoru Gojo tells Toji that he should have cut his head off to ensure that he actually killed him. There have been plenty examples of sorcerers being able to use their specific curse techniques even when their guts have been damaged. Like Hakari when Kashimo blows off a huge chunk of his side, and Yuki when Kenjaku splits her in half. In the case of Hikari, we see that he's able to both expand his domain and heal his side, while Yuki is able to summon a freaking black hole while being cleaved in two. So we understand that Gojo would potentially be able to heal himself to a near-death state with the assistance of all these factors. But at the same time, I don't think healing alone could get Gojo back to the state he was in after being slashed by Sukuna. I think in order to truly come back to life, Gojo will have to sacrifice one of his most precious assets, something that makes him truly a god in the Jujutsu world, his 6 eyes. Yes, this is a popular theory also talked about by many YouTubers, and I personally think this is exactly what's going to happen, and here's why. We know that binding vows in Jujutsu Kaisen are a massive part of the power system, and the amp that it gives you is directly proportional to what you're giving up. In Yuta's fight against Geto, he sacrifices his life in order to allow Rika to have no limit to the amount of cursed energy she could produce. And Hikari gave his arm during his fight with Kashimo to protect his body at all costs. Fortunately or unfortunately for Gojo, he has hands down the most precious thing in all of JJK, being his 6 eyes. So I believe that Gojo could absolutely come back from literal death by performing a binding vow and exchanging his 6 eyes for his own life. Furthermore, this also handles Gege's biggest frustration with the character of Gojo being this overpowered and overwhelming presence when he's around. If Gojo were to come back without his 6 eyes, that would truly change everything and reinforce the main cast as the one to take down Sukuna. We know from Gojo himself that there were members of his clan that had the limitless curse technique but didn't possess the 6 eyes. So it's likely that Gojo could still be an active combatant, but nowhere near the same level he was at when he had them. And I personally think from a thematic standpoint, having Gojo witness all of his students rise up and take down the King of Curses is something that would just tie the whole story together for me. We know that ever since the beginning, Gojo has been fixated on correcting the world of Jujutsu and fostering strong allies in order to make that happen. And what better way for Gojo to envision this dream by seeing his students take down the big bad of the series. Seeing his nurtured students grow into the roles that he envisioned for them is some beautiful thematic writing that I would ultimately find really satisfying. But whether this actually hashes out is another thing all on its own. But what do you guys think? Is Gojo coming back, or is this all just me coping? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't, be sure to check out my video on Yuta and Yuji bodying Sukuna in last week's chapter. As always, stay curious, anime fam. Peace.